Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and thank you for tuning in to our video, Is Your Exercise Routine Helping or Hindering Your Birth? So this was originally taped for Periscope, which is an online streaming video, and feel free, of course, to join us on that. So there's a few times during the video you're going to notice that I'm responding to questions and saying hi, kind of a little shout out to people. So that's what Periscope is about. It's interactive with the clientele, with the audience during the discussion. So I hope you enjoy and have a wonderful day. Namaste. Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I'm the founder and director of the Prenatal Yoga Center. And we often get comments about the cat, Toby, so there she is. So I'm also a Lamaze teacher and a labor support doula and a mother of two. And I want to talk a little bit about, is your exercise routine helping or hindering your birth? So this is a really personal topic for me because I felt like had someone talked to me more about this, my own first birth would have been very different. So this came about in a few different ways. So some of the factors that contributed to this conversation tonight, again, my own experience, which I'll talk a little bit about, my recent obsession with Instagram, which you might start to look through, and if you see pictures that say prenatal yoga, some of them are poses that I think are fantastic. Women really being mindful of their body, can be strenuous in a safe way, but then I think there are a lot of pictures that are totally inappropriate for the pregnant body that are still being practiced and almost celebrated by people. So we can definitely talk more about that. Oh, I see Yali just came on. Hi, Yali. And then I think there's the issues I had with students who do a lot of bar classes, and they're ending up with a lot of tight piriformis muscles and tight pelvic floors. And then an interesting piece came along. Part of our teacher training is that our prenatal teacher trainers, they do an interview with a woman who did prenatal yoga during their pregnancy, and we start to talk a little bit about that. So several of those pieces contributed to why I want to talk tonight. I'm going to read a snippet of the interview that we had with a pregnant mom. So let me first kind of back up and tell you a little bit about my story. So I often talk about the women that continue their exercise routine well into their pregnancy, and it's probably not appropriate. So for my yoga practice, I definitely surrendered and I let it be a different experience. And for me, my practice was really an opportunity to be in my body and experience my body. So I came to yoga from being a dancer, musical theater, and that, in my background, that didn't always feel so good. What I was asked to do from a choreographer wasn't about how my body felt and if it was enjoyable and if I could really find expression. It was the choreographer said, this is what you're doing and this is how you're doing it, and there really wasn't much interest in my comfort. So when I came into yoga, it really was about exploring what my body was capable of and being really mindful of what felt good. So fortunately, I felt like I was able to translate my pregnancy and yoga into a different realm. Now, where I had a very hard time was with my gym rat routine. I was stubborn, and I came to it with a lot of body image issues, as I think a lot of people can relate to, and I was really reluctant to let too much in my body change except my belly. I think a lot of women out there probably can relate, and so I didn't modify how I should have, and I think, again, a lot of women do that, and I think they end up suffering in their birth after. And so here I was, a prenatal yoga teacher for, at that point, I don't know, 9 years. So again, the yoga I knew, the pregnant body I knew, but I didn't really let myself digest that for how my pregnancy would be. And so I was taking spin class about 5 days a week. I was actually in my spin clothes the day I went into labor with my son. And I remember one of my teachers telling me that even though the students always, looked great and they were healthy looking, many of her spin students that were pregnant ended up with a C-section. And I said, absolutely, it's not going to happen to me. This is what I do. Of course, I know what I'm doing. No worries. And she recommended I stop around 30 weeks. And I get that now. And I didn't. So what I realized after my 42-hour labor is, had I been in a hospital, I absolutely would have had a C-section. I said, failure to progress, baby's too big, not going to fit through. Fortunately, I did a home birth and everything was fine. Baby's heart rate was fine and my blood pressure was fine, but it took a lot to get him out. afterwards, I realized a lot of it had to do with what I did to my body. Spinning in particular, if you do it that much, it's really tightening for the pelvic floor. It's tightening for the pelvic floor muscles. It's tightening for the pelvic ligaments. It's tightening for the psoas. All of that can create the malposition of the baby. So what we want is this supple, stable pelvis, but not this constricted, tight pelvis. And that's what I ended up with. And I really think a lot had to do with the spinning. And I later worked with a physical therapist who agreed, next time don't do that. Or do it more in moderation. And so that's where I kind of come to the idea of, let go a little bit of the spinning. So my second birth, absolutely none of that. And a lot of my students feel the same way. So then I started to do a little bit of research online about, spinning in pregnancy. And I found a few articles. And one woman said, if I hadn't had the stamina from spin, I wouldn't have been able to push for 3 hours. And I thought to myself, well, if she didn't keep spinning, maybe she wouldn't have had to push for 3 hours. Of course, I don't know the specifics, but that's just something that I'm thinking about, so that spinning, the tightening of the pelvic floor, the imbalance it can create in the pelvic floor, the imbalance it can create in the psoas and the ligaments, I just don't think it's meant for a healthy birth. And that brings me to what one of my students was also telling me. So she was telling me for her first birth, she did bar classes every day. And again, I think everything's fine in moderation. So in bar classes, they do a lot of external rotation, which is really tightening for the external rotators in the glutes. And she was saying her whole first pregnancy, she was having, there was a question that I think is appropriate. I was a spin instructor, stopped when I got pregnant, but I still had a breech baby. I never want to blame, especially since I do blame myself. But as I mentioned, I think there is something to do with the baby's position and the instability of the pelvis if the muscles are really tight. So thank you, viewer, for sharing that. I appreciate that. All right, so kind of back to the bar class. So the bar classes, it's a lot of external rotation. That's tightening the glutes. It's tightening the pelvic floor. It's tightening the rotators. And the student was telling me she was constantly having really tight, spasming piriformis muscles and even pelvic floor muscles. So again, everything's fine in moderation more or less, but I think you need to be mindful of the poses that you're doing, the exercise you're doing. In the long run, are they helping or hindering you? Because for me, it was such an obstacle to overcome postpartum because, the birth in itself was so hard. And again, fortunately, it was a vaginal birth, but if I had a cesarean, that would have been 6 weeks of really nothing. So I have to think, weighing the risk versus the benefits. So maybe letting go a little bit of some of the exercise routines and finding ones that are really conducive to the pregnant body. So, we got another one. Is that helping? I can't channel. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. So if you wouldn't mind clarifying, I'd be happy to answer your question. All right, so let's talk a little bit back at the yoga. So obviously I believe in prenatal yoga. I believe in yoga. It's something I've dedicated my life to. I've practiced for years. But where I'm finding a little challenging is when I see all of these, when I see many advanced yoginis doing poses that I think are detrimental to their body, as well as detrimental to the other pregnant moms out there thinking, well, should I still be doing that? And let's talk a little bit about that. All right, we had another person just jump in. I love the questions. I noticed a huge shift when I stopped Zumba in 24 weeks in terms of tightness. Oh, I almost lost it. And because of rotation. Perfect. Yes, absolutely. We want to make sure that the body's well balanced. So thank you for sharing your experience and your comment. All right, so for some of these advanced yoga poses that I'm seeing, again, you feel free to Instagram. I'm sure you'll see a lot of them. A lot of them have to do with deep back bend. So I'm going to come straight out and talk about deep back bend. I think it's really dangerous. So not only, and now I'm talking later in pregnancy, like when there's a belly. So the rectus abdominal muscles, that's your first set of abdominals. You have 4 layers. You have your rectus abdominals, your external obliques, your internal obliques, your transversus abdominals. So your rectus abdominals, those 6-pack muscles, when the belly's protruding forward because the uterus growing, they're already starting to stretch. And then add a deep back bend to that. So the linea alba, that center part where the fascia is held together, 2 sides of the abdominal walls approximated, as those deep back bends continue and the belly's pushing forward, the uterus is pushing forward, the 2 sides of the rectus abdominal start to separate. That's diastasis. And it's not really healthy for the baby, and it's hard postpartum because then we have to draw the fascia back together and draw the abdominal muscles back together. So these moms, they're doing the lumbar curve, the lower back. It's already an exaggerated curve from pregnant. So they're putting more pressure in the lower back and maybe making the SI joint, the sacroiliac joint, more unstable. But now they're taking these abdominal muscles, they're stretching them and weakening them. And then we go a little bit deeper into what I'm concerned about, is they're also stretching the uterus. So if a woman has an anterior placenta, meaning the placenta is to the front of her uterus, it's attached, as she's overstretching her uterus, she can actually have what's called placental abruption, where the placenta detaches from the uterus, which is extremely dangerous for mom and baby. And it really can cause extreme problems. So I just ask those that are doing those poses and those looking at those poses, praising them, really, what's the risk versus the benefit? Is it about the pose? Is it about finding this picture perfect pose? Or is it about the internal experience of the yoga? And in my opinion, if it's about taking a picture in a very advanced pose where it looks like, wow, I'm so pregnant and look at me, I have to ask myself, what's the purpose of that? Is it about the mom and baby connection? Is it about taking the practice to the deeper level? Or is it about capturing a picture? So again, this is my opinion, but I think it's really unsafe. Also, during pregnancy, because of all the hormones, the body is definitely more loose. You have relaxin, you have progesterone. Those are softening the ligaments, tendons, and the connective tissue. And a woman can be more apt to overstrain. And when she overstretches and overstrains, if her ligaments, which don't have the same, oh, hello from Moscow, ligaments don't have the same pull as a muscle. So if she's overstretching a ligament, she can create permanent damage to that ligament because it doesn't bounce back like a muscle. Again, risk versus a benefit. And I'm also seeing a lot of advanced inversions in these yoga pictures of pregnant moms. So no matter how advanced you are, your center of gravity is changing because there's now the pelvis is changing, the uterus is growing. And I would just hate to think of what happens to a woman if she falls out of a pose. It can be really dangerous. Even if she's never fallen out, her body's changing every day as her baby's growing. And then more on just kind of the childbirth ed side, because that's where my mind goes, about fetal position, is if she's constantly upside down, that's not really aligning the baby in optimal fetal position. We want the head down in the pelvis. We don't want the body upside down. So again, that kind of brings me back to why I think we need to be more mindful about how one practices yoga and the message we're telling other women about the way they practice yoga. So kind of let's backtrack a little bit to that interview that my teacher trainee did. And it was to interview a woman about her experience in prenatal yoga. So I have that here. So if you wouldn't mind me reading that to you. So this is from Maya Bell. The way I practiced transformed into something I hadn't anticipated. Something changes when you become responsible for the growth of a pure and innocent human being, that you eat healthy for your baby and you nurture yourself for your baby. One of those things included me doing yoga for what is now him, and rather than placing the importance on the potential strenuous physicality of yoga, I did it to internalize, connect, and feel peace. This included even just finding a quiet place to close my eyes, follow my breath, and do small and subtle physical movements throughout the week. When my mind was quiet, I could really listen to any of the needs of my pregnancy. And I think that's just beautiful, because looking at this person's practice, and this was a very advanced yogini, and recognizing that she could let the ego go and look that there could be some potential issues with some of these practices, and look for, who is this practice for? Is it for her and her baby, or her and the ego? So I'm really proud that that student shared that with us. So I just want to invite you, if you're facing this issue of here you are pregnant and it's hard to make that change, it's hard to let go. Pregnancy is an amazing transformation, and the journey into motherhood, it could be a little challenging. And, you know, just speaking from my own experience of motherhood, there are some challenges. There's some surrenders that are really not easy. And so I think by making this first step to saying, this is my body, this is my baby, and I'm doing it for my body and baby at this time, it might make it easier to let go of some of the things that might be hard. You know, just accepting and surrendering to the transformation of becoming a mother. So I hope everyone out there, this maybe helped you. And again, those that responded and shared your experience, thank you so much. And go do some prenatal yoga. Go take a walk. Go have a swim. Have a wonderful night. Namaste. Thank you so much.